everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Stephen. I'm the Director of Education for Beyond Education Consulting. I'm bringing you some of the latest news regarding college admissions trends regarding the SAT and ACT exams. It would seem, based on fairly recent information here in January and February of 2024, that there is a renewed interest in these tests as being required elements for college admissions. In our latest newsletter, we provided several instances, several releases from a variety of organizations discussing how these exams seem to be doing much more good than any sort of harm or any sort of handicap, if you will, for students who are applying to college. Now, today I'm going to go ahead and take you through just a few, or rather a couple, of those sources we posted. But again, you can find links to everything I'm discussing within our newsletter, within our social media platforms, and really anywhere that we have an online presence. We'll make sure to make this available to you. So please let us know if you have any questions or concerns. But with that said, let's go ahead and get right into it. One of the most prominent studies, this came out in 2024, January, that is, from Opportunity Insights. Opportunity Insights is a study group based out of Harvard, and we've got them here with some information regarding standardized test scores and academic performance. Now, one thing we want to go ahead and note is it does mention this is currently considered for Ivy Plus colleges, but frankly, these are how the conversations often get started. We look at one end of the spectrum for colleges, and frankly, other colleges will begin to think like them in some cases, or not. It really depends upon which way the conversation goes among admissions officers. Let's go ahead and consider their findings first and foremost. Finding number one, students with higher SAT and ACT scores are more likely to have higher college GPAs than their peers with lower scores. Now, as far as why this might be the cause, it's simply the case that, as I say in finding number two, high school GPA does a very poor job of predicting academic success in college. I think these two findings are very, very much linked together because the fact of the matter is that when it comes to high school GPA, every teacher, every piece of curricula, it's all going to be delivered a little bit differently, a different level of rigor, a different level of explanation or required depth of understanding. The fact of the matter is that standardized exams, putting everyone onto what is considered the same playing field, requiring the same degree of understanding and ability to apply the concepts they learned in school, well, ultimately, that just leads to better study skills. It leads to better learners, people who are going to be more flexible when it comes to interpreting content in questions, whether it be for math or reading or writing. So what we're, in other words, seeing here is that based on these studies' results, the SAT and ACT serve to actually teach students, in some cases, new ways of thinking about problems, new ways of approaching content that simply may not have been taught to them within school. And again, high school GPA historically has not been the be-all end-all of admissions because we know that not all schools are built the same, quite frankly. Private schools, public schools, Catholic schools, other different types of boarding schools, there's simply a lot of variety out there. And so trying to say that all schools within the K through 12 system are equal, not necessarily. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that based on your school, you have to worry so much about what your sort of college opportunities are going to look like. But again, it is the case that the SAT and ACT can help you say more about yourself as a student, more about yourself as a learner than just your GPA alone can. I think that's really the big takeaway here. Finding number three from Opportunity Insight states that students, even from different socioeconomic backgrounds, who have comparable SAT and ACT scores receive similar grades in college. Now, this, I think, is a really important takeaway because historically, college professors and high school teachers have not really agreed on college readiness for their students. High school teachers are very often thinking that their students are ready. Their students have everything it takes to be successful in college. College professors historically have not quite agreed. So looking at how, regardless of socioeconomic background, and therefore we can probably imagine, regardless of what school you're coming from, if you can see that SAT and ACT scores have a strong correlation with college performance, professors will be appreciative of that. Admissions officers will be appreciative of that. And so the bottom line is that this takeaway in particular says a lot about the potency, if you will, or the strong indicative potential of the SAT and the ACT. All of these things put together caused opportunity or led Opportunity Insights to conclude that the SAT and ACT exams for at least Ivy and Ivy Plus colleges are very, very helpful tools, not just for admissions officers, but clearly for students as well. Now, along with Opportunity Insights, we can continue on and talk about a letter that was released from Dartmouth as they too began to make the decision to reinstate the requirements of the SAT and the ACT. So there at the very top, just want to make sure we have the Dartmouth header. This is direct from the school, and it is a report from a working group of professors on the role of standardized testing in undergraduate admissions. So again, right on topic. What were their takeaways? Well, number one, SAT and ACT scores, again, are highly predictive of academic achievement at schools like Dartmouth. And so once more, we see that these standardized exams, the performance the students have, whether high or low, seem to correlate directly with how the students do ultimately in their college experiences and their college careers. Number two, that the SAT is a strong predictor, they say, of academic success at Dartmouth for all subgroups. In other words, regardless of how they parsed the data, the SAT remained a statistically relevant element when it came to predicting success for students at their school. Feedback number three, they said, a test optional policy, they said, is actually likely a barrier to identifying less advantaged students who would succeed at Dartmouth. And once again, academically disadvantaged students or less advantaged students, when you put them onto a standardized tests playing field, we find ultimately it will give a better idea of how that student could potentially do within their college experience. Again, having the opportunity to sort of distance themselves, if you will, from what may have been a lackluster or less advantaged high school experience, giving them the opportunity to differentiate their abilities through a standardized platform and put them on the same foundation as everyone else across not just the US, but the world, seems to be a help, not a hindrance, when it comes to their admissions rates. And number four, test optional policies do not necessarily increase the proportion of less advantaged students in the applicant pool. What we're finding is that the pools of applicants is increasing no matter, or across the board, quite frankly, with a test optional policy. But that doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that less advantaged students are proportionally, as they say here, more of those applicants. In fact, you get more of everyone, we find, whether they be advantaged, less advantaged, or somewhere in between. When you open up test optional policies, you just get more applicants of all backgrounds. And that's not necessarily what the policy was intended to do. So ultimately, in terms of the benefits of test optional policies, it seems like they're middling at best. Whereas the ability to predict academic success, the ability to tie SAT, ACT preparation to higher grades, higher GPAs within college, et cetera, again, these things are much more of a help than a hindrance. And colleges are beginning to think about these tests in very different ways than they have in the last few years. Now, as far as some takeaways that we have, what do these things mean for us and you as stakeholders within the K through 12 process, within every step of the way that gets us to college applications? Well, number one, schools are talking to each other. One of the things that's very important as a takeaway here is, I think, the timing of when this information came out. Everything we're learning about, whether it's from Dartmouth or Yale or Harvard or really any of the other sort of conversations that are happening on campuses, they're happening all at the same time, roughly around here in January and February. Now, that's very interesting timing because it suggests that either it's a tremendous coincidence or admissions groups are talking to each other. And admissions groups, whether they're at the Ivy level or anything beneath, they're probably thinking more and more about the validity and use of the SAT and ACT exams. We've been hearing from admissions officers for some time that effectively getting rid of the SAT and ACT was just throwing away good data. Now, certainly we can quibble over whether the SAT and the ACT are the best versions of themselves they could possibly be, whether they're the best standardized exams they could possibly be, but to get rid of them entirely, it seems, based on all available data and anecdotally, not to have been a great call. And we're learning this now, and what can we do about it? Well, First, as far as schools are concerned, it seems likely, number two there, SAT and ACT are going to make a steady return to requirement status. And as we saw earlier, they still already are acknowledged as great indicators, or at least good indicators, of college success. So once more, admissions officers will have to take note and consider, do we want more students without SAT and ACT scores, ones that are a little bit more questionable or just less certain of being successful at their given institutions? Or will they go ahead and pivot more likely toward those students with SAT and ACT scores, i.e., those they have a better sense of when it comes to success or potential? Standardized testing, perhaps more than ever, is going to be viewed, we think, as the standard. And this is not just true across the SAT and the ACT, but also the AP exams and even other admissions exams, such as the TOEFL for English learners and international students. Standardized exams, by putting everybody onto an equal playing field effectively, really become the sort of bar none best indicator that a lot of admissions officers will have for what is a student likely to achieve when it comes to their classes on the new college campus they'll be going to. And so finally, what's the biggest takeaway? What can we recommend to you today? Test early, test often, and be more prepared than ever for these exams. We're going to go ahead and continue delivering more news to you as it becomes available regarding admissions trends. But for now, remember, SAT and ACT, it seems like they're on everyone's minds here in January and February, and we want to be a part of that conversation with you, whether it's your students that are currently facing the exams or those that will be in the next year or two. Thank you again. This has been Stephen, the Director of Education for Beyond Education Consulting. Let's talk soon.